In 2016, Capcom rolled out an update for Street Fighter V on PC in order to stop players from hacking the game to earn infinite in-game currency. The way they did it was by quietly adding an anti-cheat driver onto players' machines called Capcom.sys. But one slight problem, this driver contained a backdoor that allowed absolutely any application running on the PC to bypass Windows' built-in security precautions and execute code at the highest possible privilege level. Or, in other words, it opened up your PC completely to any program or hacker that fancied looking around, or obviously, worse. And best of all, deleting the game wouldn't even remove the exploit. The whole thing was a massive mess and a real headache for the company. But the truth is that people have been using random ordinary video games to completely blow the doors off of random hardware, and this has been an issue for the longest time. In one of our recent videos, we took a deep dive into the dark arts of console piracy, looking at the unhinged physical abuse that gamers put their systems through in order to save a few quid. However, these were the extreme and early ways to hack your console. It may take time, but these joystick jackers will eventually find a way to hack your console, and more often than not, they do it using completely standard, ordinary video games. Today, we're going to be looking at the completely ordinary and the often totally rubbish retail video games that were used to break open your retro gaming systems. Games that were more often than not gathering dust at the bottom of a bargain bin before suddenly skyrocketing in price on eBay overnight. Just because some bloke on a forum figured out that crashing a game in a very specific sort of way would magically leave the system security gate wide open. And yes, I suppose I should probably put this disclaimer in here. Do not copy any methods that you see in this video. These are still very early methods on how to pirate a console or a computer, and more often than not, they will likely brick your system. And obviously on top of that, piracy is a bad thing. You shouldn't do it. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about Nintendo, because obviously we're going to start this video with Nintendo. But before we go ahead, this is my desk, my E7 FlexiSpot desk to be specific. A desk that I use every single day to make every single video that you see on this channel. As well as the odd bit of DJing, and most importantly, as I'm sure you will all agree, it's where I let the cats sleep too. Yes, this video is sponsored by FlexiSpot. Now, outside of taking the kids to and from school every day, I spend about 10 hours a day at this desk. So of course, having a table that smoothly goes up and down, allowing me to work in multiple positions, is incredibly beneficial to my health. And of course, the kids and the wife all use this desk, and they can raise it or lower it to their desired heights. On top of that, like I said, I like to blow off steam every so often, DJing. Yes, I am actually a DJ, done the club and festival circuits back in the day, but since I've been a dad, it's very much become a bedroom hobby. And let me tell you, as a pub DJ in my teen years, hunching over a blanketed pool table gets old fast. You got to get this stuff at the desired perfect height, and yeah, this table was perfect for that. The E7 is also seriously sturdy. I mean, this thing can hold 160 kilograms or 355 pounds. And look, it's one of those things that once you have one, you'll wonder how you ever lived without one. Go and have a browse, and if you like what you see, use my code YTE730 and make sure you put my name in at the checkout so they know that I sent you. Yeah, thanks FlexiSpot once again for sponsoring the video. When Nintendo launched the 3DS, they had a serious point to prove when it came to security. If you remember the era of the original Nintendo DS, you'll know that its security was practically non-existent. It was famously blown wide open by the R4 card, a little plastic cartridge that took a micro SD card and let you load up the entire DS library for free. These were so unbelievably common that you literally can't walk around a Sunday boot fair or a flea market today without seeing an R4 card bundled in with a beaten up old DS Lite. These things were cheap and easy piracy for the absolute masses. Obviously, Nintendo hated these things, so they made sure to lock the 3DS down super tight. The early 3DS flashcards that tried to mimic the R4 were incredibly cumbersome, completely rubbish, and often required you to stay on a ridiculously old firmware version just to get them to work. The golden age of drag-and-drop DS piracy seemed to be dead. That was until November 2014, when a user called Smealum managed to crack open the console completely by using a game called Cubic Ninja. Now, Cubic Ninja was a 2011 puzzle platformer published by Ubisoft, where you tilted the console to roll a little square ninja around a maze. I mean, it was terrible, critics hated it, nobody bought it, and it immediately earned its rightful place in the 99p bargain bins. But the important thing for this video is that Cubic Ninja also included a level editor. You could create your own level and then use a QR code to share that level with your friends. You would just point the 3DS camera at another 3DS QR code and the game would read the data and build that level. Which was exactly how Smealum hacked the system. By creating a corrupt QR code and scanning it with the 3DS camera, the game wouldn't know how to handle the data. It would trigger a massive buffer overflow, crash the game's menu, and immediately execute unauthorized code directly from the system's SD card slot. And just like that, this incredibly below average bargain bin game became the holy grail of the 3DS hacking scene. This exploit, dubbed Ninjax, was the very first public software-based homebrew entry point for the console.
I'm not even joking, I've seen this game at a dollar store. Cubic Ninja on a 3DS, I've seen it at a fucking dollar store. Now motherfuckers are trying to swoop in and scoop up as many copies as possible, because this game is the direct reason right now for a lot of people to go and exploit the firmware and hardware on Nintendo 3DS to go and run homebrew software on it.
Oh, that's a throwback, innit? Yep, overnight, copies of Cubic Ninja completely vanished from store shelves. Gamers were practically sprinting to their local GameStop or CEX to buy up every single second-hand copy that they could find. A game that was literally struggling to sell for £1 was suddenly being listed on eBay for upwards of £50 to £80. In response, Nintendo panicked, and because the game was only sold digitally on the Japanese eShop, they completely wiped it from their servers to stop the Japanese players from downloading the exploit. But for the rest of the world, the physical cartridges were already out there. A completely forgotten, critically panned shovelware game was responsible for one of the first major steps in beating Nintendo's security system. Let's step back a few years before the Nintendo 3DS and look at a console or a handheld which I believe may just be one of the greatest handhelds ever made, the PlayStation Portable. In my previous video, I talked about the terrifying Pandora's battery hack, where gamers were literally slicing open pressurized lithium batteries with a Stanley knife just to force the PSP into a factory developer mode. But before people were risking third-degree burns and chemical fires, they used a much simpler, safer option: UMD discs. When the PSP first launched, the security was full of holes. Firmware version 1.50 was the absolute holy grail for piracy. It allowed you to run custom code, SNES emulators and full PSP games directly from your memory stick Pro Duo. But Sony wasn't stupid. They started aggressively pushing out mandatory firmware updates. If you bought a new game, it forced you to update your console to play it, permanently locking you out of the homebrew party. In response, hackers needed to find a way to get that firmware back to 1.50. And ironically, the game that did that was the most criminal game on the system, Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories. In late 2005, some absolute genius realised that Rockstar had been a bit sloppy when coding how the game would read your save data. If you downloaded a specifically crafted, malicious long save file from the internet, shoved it onto your memory stick and tried to load it into the game's code would completely panic. It would trigger our PSP, the buffer overflow, the screen would go black, the console would freak out, and suddenly it would bypass all of Sony's security and run a custom downgrader program. Within days, the original unpatched UMD release of Liberty City Stories became the most sought after piece of plastic on the planet. Gamers were scouring the shelves at their local game shops, checking the serial numbers on the spine of the boxes to make sure they were getting the exact unpatched version required for the hack. And obviously, whenever something like this happens, companies like Sony do whatever they can as quickly as they can to put out a patch to stop it, which is exactly what they did, and also Rockstar put out new patched versions of the games to stop all of this. And with that, Sony thought that their system was secure once again. But then, in 2007, lightning struck twice, as this time it wasn't a massive AAA open world crime simulator that broke the system, it was a puzzle game. Lumines was a fantastic launch title for the PSP, literally one of my all-time favourites, but by 2007 it had been out for 2 years and was basically worthless. I mean, you could easily pick it up for about $5 by this point. And lucky for hackers, this was the exact point when they realised that Lumines had the same save data functionality downgrade as GTA. All you had to do was copy a dodgy save file onto your console, boot up Lumines, and simply press start on the main menu. The game would try to load the corrupted profile data, crash instantly, and boom! The console was yours to command. You could downgrade your firmware or install custom firmware directly on the spot. And just like before, Lumines went from being a £5 bargain bin afterthought to a literal black market commodity. Overnight, online retailers completely sold out. On eBay, second-hand copies were being listed for £60, £70 and sometimes even £100. People who had absolutely zero interest in puzzle games were suddenly desperate to get their hands on one. Which is a great thing. More people should play this game. Heck, I remember thinking that Sony should have given this game away free with the console. We could have had another Tetris and Game Boy situation here. Although, in hindsight, can you imagine how bad it would have been if there were the exact amount of Lumines copies needed for everyone to pirate their systems? Yeah, probably best you don't take my advice, Sony, eh? Okay, so this next one operates the exact same way as the previous entry, so we'll get through this one a little quicker. We've had Lumines, which was a puzzler game, and we've had Cubic Ninja, which was obviously complete shovelware. But for this next entry, we need to look at a game which just so happens to be the most anticipated launch title of its generation. When the Nintendo Wii launched in 2006, it was an absolute cultural phenomenon. Everyone and their nan was playing Wii Sports, but if you were a proper gamer, the only reason you bought a Wii on day one was to play the Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. And because it was a launch title, the game was rushed out the door before the devs really truly had worked out the Wii's operating system. And with that, in 2008, a group of hackers known as Team Tweezers discovered a massive glaring hole in how the game read text strings from its save data. This exploit was dubbed the Twilight Hack, and it was beautifully simple. First, you had to play the game normally for about 5 minutes just to create a legitimate save file on the console. Then you download a custom deeply corrupted save file from the internet onto a standard SD card. You popped it into the front of your Wii and overwrote your legit save file with the hacked one. When you booted up the game and loaded that file, Link would spawn right at the beginning of the game, but behind the scenes, the hackers had changed the name of Link's horse, Epona, from a standard 5-letter name into a massive, incredibly long string of malicious code. All you had to do to trigger the hack was to get Link to talk to a specific NPC. The game would try to load the horse's name into the dialogue box, realise the name was thousands of characters too long, completely panic, and trigger a buffer overflow. The screen would go black, lines of code would matrix scroll down your telly, and within seconds, the Wii security was totally compromised. This hack was completely monumental because it allowed for the homebrew channel to be installed directly onto your Wii. Now, look, if you're anything like me, the homebrew channel, this is probably the first time you've ever heard or seen this intro. Yeah, that's not nostalgic at all. From here, you could launch USB loaders to play pirated Wii games off an external hard drive or run emulators from basically every retro console under the sun. The funniest part about all of this in hindsight was, unlike Cubic Ninja, Twilight Princess was the system seller. Nintendo couldn't just go out there and rip this off the shelves. And unlike Cubic Ninja and even Lumines, it had already sold millions of copies. Because of this, Nintendo found itself trapped in a desperate game of cat and mouse. They would push a mandatory Wii system update to block the hacked save file from being copied over, and a week later, the hackers would just release Twilight Hack version 2.0 to bypass it. Eventually, patch discs of Twilight Princess found their way onto store shelves, but once again, by this point, the damage was done, and the hackers had already moved on to easier hacks, making the Wii one of the most heavily pirated consoles in history. Behind the DS, that is. Damn, Nintendo didn't have much luck, did they? And with that, let's go and have a look at the GameCube. The GameCube. In my opinion, the last great console name before everything just became a number. Toasty! Yeah, okay, the best named console that was actually released, that is. Oh yeah, and is anyone out there with me? It had one of the greatest intros to a video game console ever.
Yeah, nigga, I'm still fucking with you. Still waters run deep. Still Snoop Dogg and D.R.E. Nah, nigga. Guess who's back?
Yeah, that didn't work. Now, unlike the Wii or the PSP, the GameCube didn't actually have a proper operating system to exploit. There was no main dashboard or complex save data manager that you could easily crash, so if you wanted to run custom code, you had to physically inject it whilst the game was already running. And as this was the first ever Nintendo console to have rival company Sega games on it that wasn't a handheld, what company do you think was responsible for the hack? Good old Phantasy Star Online. Thanks for taking the sting out of playing Sega games on a Nintendo console. Because this was one of the only GameCube games to actually support online multiplayer, it required the chunky, overpriced GameCube broadband adapter. Hackers realised that if you hooked your console directly up to your PC and messed around with the DNS settings, you could actually trick the game into thinking that your computer was the official Sega server. So when you booted up Phantasy Star and tried to connect online, the game would ask the server to download the latest event quests. But instead of a quest, your PC would shoot a massive corrupted payload of code straight down the Ethernet cable. It completely broke the game's network handler and allowed you to steam pirated GameCube ISOs from your PC directly onto the console. No soldering mod chips, no taking a hacksaw to the plastic shell to fit full-size DVDs like we talked about before, just an obscure dial-up era RPG acting as a massive open backdoor to the entire system. And worst of all, outside of selling updated newer versions of the game or even updated firmwares on newer consoles, there was nothing that Nintendo could do. And finally, here we are, the one you all knew would be on this list. Let's not kid ourselves. It's the original Xbox. In the past, we talked about the absolute nightmare of hot swapping live hard drives, risking electrocution and fried motherboards just to get a custom dashboard. But eventually, a much safer and software-only method came along, and this time, who have we got to thank? Sam Fisher. Yep. You see, Microsoft made a massive fatal flaw with the original Xbox. Those controller ports? Yeah. They were literally just standard USB ports hidden inside a weird proprietary shape. Not too different to later consoles and even mini consoles actually, but yeah, that's literally all they were. Because of this, hackers quickly figured out that you could just splice a standard USB cable onto an Xbox controller wire, or buy a cheap adapter and plug a completely normal USB flash drive right into the console. In fact, when people worked this out, it became such a common thing that the USB leads that cheap Chinese import sites would normally sell completely sold out, forcing people to do stuff like this. The monsters. But of course, that's just half the problem. You still needed to actually break into the console. And in order to do that, you needed a copy of the original Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell, plus a modified save file downloaded onto that USB stick. You copied a dodgy save file over to the Xbox hard drive using the USB method, booted up the game, and from the main menu you would click the start game, choose the hacked profile, and voila! Just like that, the game's code completely tripped over itself, the screen went black, the console security instantly folded, and it booted directly into a custom dashboard installer. Once again, no soldering, no hot swapping live cables, no risking of your life, just a heavily armed stealth operative accidentally leaving the back doors wide open for every single pirate on the planet.
Welcome to the treasure room.
Hey there guys, thanks for checking out the video. This is the part of the video where I give a massive shout out to all of my supporters, all of my Patreons, all of my YouTube members, all of the people that you see down here. I have to be a little bit quieter, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning here. I've been editing all day, but yeah, I hope you liked this video because I had a lot of fun making it. I just couldn't stop working on this video. I really enjoyed this one. I always find these deep dives quite interesting to look into, and yeah, like I say, I hope you guys did too. And if you want to support the show, allow me to make videos like this every single week, again like these awesome people do, then please do consider becoming a Patreon or a YouTube member. There will be links down below. Otherwise, please just hit the subscribe button. That is without a doubt the most important thing. The more people that hit subscribe and like and comment and hype and all that jazz, yeah, it actually really helps, big time. Really helps. So yeah, anyway, let's give a massive shout out to the following: Andrew Dalton, Brian Perez, British Video Game Nerd, Carolyn Stephen, Chev Matic, Chris aka Brackman, Conrad Constantine, To Action Saxon, Dina Insidious Bliss, Jay is Manchild, Jabba Al Aiden, Jeff Mianowski, Livestream, Mass Replay, Mike Fallon, Nicholas Bertner, Patrick Grip Jansen, Paul Float, Richard Alderjick, Shadow Dragon, Swift Justice Peterson, The Sneaky Ferret, Vitas Varnes, Ye Old Hamburglar, Vike Echo, Livestream, Akatimo84, Stephen Hefner, Dina81, Kumatura Villarreal, I think I've been saying that wrong this whole time, Derakuda, Enraged Gecko, Ian Quell, Mind of the Unsane, and XZX. Yeah, you can see I'm rambling. It is well late. I have been on this video all day. So look, much love to you guys. Thanks for checking out the video. Hopefully you stick around, hopefully you hit subscribe, and hopefully you check out what I've got coming next week. But until next time, this is DJ Slope signing out, and hopefully I'll see you all next time. I'm going to bed. Bye-bye.
Still Dre Day, nigga, AK, nigga. Though I phone a lot, can't keep it home a lot. Cause when I frequent the spots that I'm known to rock, you hear the bass from the truck when I'm on the block. Ladies, they pay homage, but haters say Dre fell off. Foul, nigga, my last album was The Chronic. They wanna know if he still got it. They say raps change, they wanna know how I feel about it.
You ain't up on